Hello and welcome to the Candlelit Tales podcast. This is a very special episode of the time we got to go out west over the summer. A couple of months ago we travelled out to Andres the Stack to sit down and have a chat about all things mythological, folk related and music related. We had a story from him in the last episode, and this is the good long chat we had in his caravan. Stay tuned till the end of the episode to hear what's coming up for us, and all our links are below in the description. Thanks, guys. Welcome to a very special episode. We are here in County Clare with one of the greatest, a Gaeilgeoir, a Shanachie, a shy talker, a playwright extraordinaire, a linguist extraordinaire, a gardener, a forester. He's sorted out lockdown because he's here in the heavenly square of County Clare, and geez, he's only looking at the fairy fort over there and river run by him, and geez, there's sea next to him and everything. You're also a TG Carr presenter, and I mean, look, we just listened to a fantastic story, and it'll be on, well, various platforms, so you can listen to that. Andreas the Stack, welcome to the Candlelit Tales podcast.
Thanks, Aaron. Thank you. Thank you for coming down.
You're very welcome.
Great to be here.
Thank you for having us.
Now, we had a bit of a sound issue. Apologies for that. So hopefully you can hear us loud and clear. We're going to get talking about a few different things. Now, Andreas, your background, I want you to just tell us, summarise your life for us there really quickly. Can you?
Ooh. An ongoing journey, isn't it?
I know. I mean, how you found the way you tell stories? Like,
I don't know, I suppose I was a musician, and I'm still a musician, and I always loved playing music, you know. I mean, in 1993 I went up to Dublin to see Nirvana, so I was, you know, a grunge musician in secondary school. Around that time there was a kind of an exciting music thing in the West Coast. You had, I suppose, the Stunning, who was, you know, Ines Diamond and Donegal, were playing in Galway Town with Martin O'Connor and the accordion. Sharon Shannon had come up from County Clare to play with the Waterboys. There was a band of Crusties called the Big Geranium, so it was kind of a raggle-taggle thing. So I got into the fiddle as well. And then my dad is from Clare, my mum's from Mayo, so I always had a fairly West of Ireland identity. But my father was a writer and a storyteller, and but that wasn't really on my radar until I travelled a lot as a musician, as you do. You know, there was like the 90s, but when I came out of college in 98, or I went to college in 98, so, you know, we were always playing music in the pubs in Mayo and Galway, and coming down to Milltown Malbay for the summer sessions.
yeah, the festival in Milltown Malbay. Oh, I even knew that before I even went to Milltown Malbay.
Oh, lovely,
and bought
yeah.
a bit of carpet.
Bought a carpet. So yeah, I was always doing, I loved the small towns and places. I don't know, like, I suppose what I remember about, also I suppose I should mention at this time, there was a lot, you know, with the trad music in the 90s and the millennium and the Celtic Tiger, there was a lot of drinking and smoking going on, and I enjoyed being a kind of a, it's hard to look back at that time of your life, your mid-20s, and I suppose I was maybe an animated character, but I don't know, sometimes when I was too drunk maybe I was showing off, or maybe other times, but what I remember was I got great joy in, as all young Irish people particularly do, you know, the way everyone loves talking about the weekend, and I'd always be telling about the adventures, like we were there and we were in the middle of this tune and we were just going from Cooley's Reel into the Wise Maid when in comes this Krusty with a bag of crisps, and inside the crisps was magic mushrooms, and we ate them, and then out came the djembe bongo drum, and the pub took off, and then the Undertaker came down and we were out digging a grave. So I always loved, it was basically the misadventures and the adventures. I was always able to tell those stories.
Right.
And I always remember, you know, on a Tuesday, you know, being in company or being in a bar or whatever, talking about the weekend or some other misadventure, which was usually around a flack, yole, or, so I suppose I loved the whole, if I could misuse the word, mythology of that, or the crack, I suppose.
Yeah.
I loved, you know, the way, you know, and it's so boring now when people come up to you and they go, oh, we drank a bottle of vodka and then we went to the beach. You go, no, I'm not interested. But I suppose when I was 20, it was interesting. So that's when I first remembered that there was something, and people used to say, oh, you should be a comedian. And I was going, no, because I felt that that's, you know, for me, stand-up comedy was something that was very US or UK. It didn't resonate with where I was with the music and folklore of the west of Ireland. But it wasn't until in 2006, I had been living in Melbourne for a year or two, and I'd given up drinking drugs, so I had left that lifestyle. and I was coming back to Ireland, and when you'd meet Irish people and they'd say to you, will you have a pint? I said no. And I had a big long story to tell them everything that happened as to why I wasn't going to, you know what I mean? Because everyone goes, I'll buy you one. I go, no, I don't want one. If you buy me one, I'm going to need 101. Who's going to buy 101? Not you. So I had these stories about, losing my violin and a fire, losing my laptop, losing my mind. I had this story, but within that story, there was things, for example, like there was a while when I was getting sober, I was in Melbourne, and there's a big Greek population, for example, and I was getting food off the Greeks. I was playing in a Greek restaurant, and instead of the Greeks, they like the drink, but not as much as the Irish. They like the food and then the drink. So I was just having the food and leaving the drink. And I was eating goat and lamb and souvlaki, and I was learning how to cook with herbs. And I'd started as a waiter, and they thought it was funny. Andreas, meto magale Grace, and I was, they thought it was hilarious that there was an Irish guy with a Greek name. An Irish guy who didn't drink, they thought that was hilarious.
Of course they did,
And then I was like, Nostimu, like, is the food nice? And I'd be, and they'd be saying to each other, he thinks the food is nice because he hasn't eaten, because I was so skinny.
Of course.
I was 6 months off the beer, and I'd been homeless before that.
It deflated, like.
Yeah. So I was eating the lamb and the goat, and they were cooking it with rosemary and spuds, and it was just delicious. And also, I just grabbed sorry for crossing the camera. I just, this is probably out of tune, but my dad plays Greek bouzouki. And like my father had toured America with Paddy Keane and Tommy Peoples playing bouzouki. So when I was in the Greek restaurants, I was playing like Greek music on the fiddle and learning. I mean, not very well, but there was a bit of that going on. It started to resonate with me. So I came back to the West of Ireland in 2006, and I had all these great stories as to how I gave up the drink, and it kind of fell, like, the way you guys do the Voyage of Mail Doon or one of these. It became this kind of epic, and of course, typically as the self-absorbed, self-obsessed person that I am / was then, I was the hero of the tale.
Of course, the hero's journey, but
you have to also accept that, like, in Ireland, like, there is, in our folklore, and certainly in the songs, there was often these songs. There'd be ones like where they go like, say there's a song that goes like, with my one lean on my shoulder, shillelagh in my hand, I'll ramble the bushes of Australia like a true-born Irishman. And it goes on about these guys who's a convict, but he comes back to Ireland with a load of money. So imagine being sent out to Australia as a convict and coming home with a load of money, and go, and we worked up on the railway and down to Ballarat, and some of us grew my teeth in and some of us grew fat, and I walked down to Geelong or whatever. Then, the gold rush all the way, I made my fortune in a night and drank it in a day. So there's all this kind of shit. And then the Aussies had a version of it that was like, with a swag bag on my shoulder and a billy bong in my hand, I'll ramble the bushes of Australia like a true-born native man. So there was a lot of Irish that stayed there, and their songs converted over to the Australian bush ballad. And again, I suppose I was interested by Henry Lawton and Banjo Patterson. Banjo Patterson had written there were bush poems, and there was something about the poems and the storytelling of people like Henry Lawton and Banjo Patterson, the Australian bush poets, that was very much of the people. It was in the vernacular. Here we often associate poetry, like you're doing it for the Leaving Cert. Even though Yeats is Irish, there was very much a kind of a hierarchy that this was poetry, this was art, this was theatre.
It's a different register of language. You don't need you need your Sunday words for that shit. Like,
exactly.
Your everyday words.
So I suppose travelling, and particularly getting sober travelling, on the way home, I was starting to resonate with the poetry and the storytelling of the bush in Australia, but also because there was so much Irish and second and third generation Irish, and you could hear Irish-isms, like there was the story about Clancy from the Overflow, and the big horse that broke out. There was all these stories, and they were about fucking horses and bushfires and lads camping out in the bush, and to me they resonated with the backpacking that I was at. And I kind of had this theory that those of us that left for Australia in 2003, 2004, we left in the down times, So, like, I was out there 2006, 2007. So it was kind of a case where, like, I felt that the backpacker was the convict of today, Because there was no work for us here in Ireland. People didn't give you shite whether you had a degree or not. You just had to go. Some people probably made more money that went to United Arabic Emirates, or some people had connections in America, but a lot of us just went to Canada and Australia.
Is a kind of exile that we
Just
keep
a bit of an exile,
kind of
yeah.
repeating in Ireland, because
Totally.
we do it every time there's a recession.
Come on.
It's the exile and return. Like that's why I think that's why the myths of exile and return are so big.
So important, yeah.
You know,
Totally.
and all the songs about leaving Ireland and how much we miss Ireland that we sing in Ireland.
Oh,
Yeah.
and we sing it when we're here. Yeah, yeah,
And you
yeah.
sing, you feel nostalgic for the place that you're in. Like.
Yeah, before you've even left it. But I think there is something really interesting about going away and having your hero's journey, but finding music being the accompaniment to your storytelling, because we kind of did it the other way around in the way we started telling stories for the love of mythology and for the love of me hearing my sister telling me stories for so long that I realised it was missing the musical element until Roche joined us and started playing with us, and so we've become music with stories, but we put the music in afterwards, whereas you kind of had another way around it, whereas you had a musical kind of heritage and much more. And I'm often jealous when I start seeing the trad players and the tunes and the reels and the jigs and everything that going through their veins, and it's so interesting to see a Shanachie and a storyteller as you are find your voice in storytelling through music.
Just the different starting point, but the similar kind of ending point. Isn't it?
Yeah, but I mean, to be honest, you know, like I was saying, when I was playing music, I felt sometimes there was something missing.
Yeah.
Right.
Like I needed to do more, if that makes sense. Like I was happy playing the fiddle, and I loved jigs and reels. You know, when I was a kid, like from my teenage years to the 20s, I'd be playing, and particularly, you know, if you were smoking and drinking, if you were drinking alcohol, for example, you're pumping the drink around the body. And if you were smoking queer stuff, you know, you'd think you were Mozart. You were just making. So when I quit that, then the other that was inside me had to come out.
Yeah.
And I got back to Galway in 2006, and that year there was kind of a revolution in the arts, where there was a platform for local arts, because as you kind of know, since the Celtic Tiger, Galway before the Celtic Tiger, Galway was a great platform for West of Ireland art and the vernacular arts. And it kind of changed in the Celtic Tiger time, particularly I suppose stuff like the Arts Festival, and more recently you've seen the Volvo Ocean Race or the Galway 2020 has kind of gone off beam from the voice of the West. So I came home that year in 2006, and there was a platform called Project of Six, which was a showcase of work from the West of Ireland, and to make the point that there was so much great stuff that this is what needed to be celebrated, and that kind of stuff, West of Ireland art, is European and international. They don't, rather than having to bring in so much stuff. But anyway, I was just lucky. I jumped on stage. There was a thing called, they were having this thing every day at 5 o'clock called Live at 5, where they would have a Shannon singer work with a musician or a poet, or a writer work with a harpist or whatever. And they said to me, Monday is free. I was literally just back from Australia. And I said to the guy, I think it was Ollie Jennings was running, I said, Ollie, I'll do. And he said, are you doing the musician, and who's going to do the stories with you? I said, I've a load of stories, because in the anxiety, you know, I'd been off the drink for a year, and what I'd done was every day I'd written loads. It wasn't just morning pages. Like if I was out with people, if they started drinking, I would just put it in the book. And also I'd come home from Australia the long way. I had to leave because of visa reasons, and I'd come home through Argentina. I had a friend from Mayo, Mark Duffy from Finney, it's in the Mayo Gaeltacht, just back the road from where I'm from. He was in Buenos Aires, so I came home to Buenos Aires and Brazil, and it was amazing. And coming back that journey, it was the first time I'd ever circumnavigated the world. So we called the show I was doing, we didn't have a show, it was Stories in Music from Andrew Stack, and it was called Round the World Music Quiz.
And I saw, that was my first introduction to you in Grange Gorman, the squat in Dublin, doing that around a fire, and just a big group of hippies and artsy folk, and you know, and it was just around the fire, and you popped up, and sure there was fire spinning over here, and there was a few you know, heads around there, and Rue brought me down, and it was all lovely, and there was a few bottles, and then this lad jumps up out of the gutter of the ensemble, you know, like you don't expect it, and your man just I'm like, what is going on? You know, mind-blowing stuff, and just the speed, the enthusiasm, the musicality of it, and the colloquial nature of it as well. Like the fact that your stories were so like everybody there related to it because it seemed like, yeah, we're all broke. We all love music. Yeah, we all love drinking. Yeah, we're all like, there was elements that everyone was tapping into, and I guess that's the great aspect of the storyteller, is to kind of find something that people can tune into. But that's anyway. That was my first introduction to you when I got excited.
I heard you that night as well. You did the Thorn.
Yeah.
It was a great night.
It was great night.
What's fascinating? You did, and at the end of the Thorn, you go, the great bull, he let out a roar, and he died. And then the other bull stood up, and he let out a roar, and he died too. That's kind of like the moral of the story is, you're going to fucking die. Yeah, that's why it's fascinating. Yeah.
That's what we love about. That's what I love about the Ton, is that like it's such a war story, and then at the end of it, it's like, and you are left with nothing and nothing, because that's what happens when you fight.
Yeah.
Like,
there's a moral in myth, right? So this is a big point I want to talk about. So the Tán Bo Cúailnge, the epic story, which is a big war story, like you say, kind of has a moral of. You can.
Do you know what? I don't know if moral is the right word, because for everybody, the nice thing about mythology and the thing that I like about mythology, and the reason that we have post-show chats that go on for fucking hours after every thing that we cut down for podcasts.
They're brother and sister.
If they're not watching this, they probably know that by now.
If you didn't know.
yeah, siblings.
The reason for that is that there's a depth of meaning in myth. So like, I can say, I think the Tán is an anti-war story if you tell it in a certain way. Now you can tell it in a different way where it becomes a glorifying war story. Myths are like, I don't like to say definitively this is what it means, because I think they can mean so many different things to so many different
You might say they're like an onion.
No, you might not. No, you might not.
There are many layers.
You might not say they're like an onion, Aaron Hegarty. Get out.
Myths are like onions, everyone. That's what we've decided. Yeah, there's many layers. They're very deep. They grow underground. Sorry.
My point being.
You get it?
Like a nettle.
Interesting.
Like a nettle. Yeah, they can sting you one way and they can not sting. Yeah, I don't know.
There's a depth of meaning.
There's a depth of meaning in myths, but I also think the funny thing, the interesting thing about myth and storytelling more generally, is myths have a kind of a deep rootedness to them, because they're ones that you hear and you go, oh, I'll have that one. I'm going to tell that one. I want to do that my way. And that's how they kind of stay in the culture then, is because people keep coming back to them and going, oh, I like this one.
I read one recently, it was a book I bought in English, or Pierre bought for me, written by a friend that you met, and he had a quote.
Oh, Adam Wyatt's poetry book.
Adam Wyatt's poetry book, and he's a page.
Adam White, who's he?
Adam Wyatt is a poet, and he has written a book about, basically it's collected poetry that references Irish mythology. And he pulls out the references and kind of
discusses
them.
And what I thought,
poetically,
he quotes, but he quotes
any
good? Brilliant, beautiful book. So the first page has a quote from Joseph Campbell and Yeats, and I think it's Yeats who said that myths are made at no specific time by nobody and everybody at the same time.
Interesting.
And that's the paraphrasing, but like that's...
And that's kind of what I like. That's what I think is really interesting, because there's stories that you tell, and there's stories that, like, and as Aaron was saying, you're telling a story in a squat in Grange Gorman, and everybody's connecting to some bit of it.
Yeah.
And that to me is the start of a myth. And it might, in 100 years or 1,000 years, there's going to be some version of something, of circumnavigate. You know what I mean? Like there's the ways that they ripple and the ways that they change and the ways that they impact people. It's not always very clear or very obvious, but I think when you put a story out into the world, it's like you're starting a circuit, or you're connecting to a circuit that was started when we first came up with fucking language, and goes on for as long as we will have language. Do you know what I mean?
And the best ones stay, essentially, or the oldest ones stay.
Well, the oldest ones are the best ones, because we keep retelling them.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, we have that with tunes as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Tunes and songs, they're often not written by anyone. They're written by everyone. They're not written, and the good ones stay, because every now and then you hear some old one, you go, geez, I never heard that one before, and they go, oh yeah, that was an old tune, blah blah blah. But like the reasons, they're classics for a reason. Yeah. They're standards for reasons. They're oldies and goldies,
And so in comparison now, the story you told, which is a beautiful story of, what's the name of the town under sea?
The village of Kilstifeen.
Kilstifeen. Beautiful story, by the way. Thank you very much for telling us that. That's a folk tale, right? That would be classed as folk. Because as far as I can see, they're named folk tales because folk tell them about folk that are around them and places that folk go to. I mean, it seems pretty obvious, right?
Yeah, no,
so
I'm reminded of the Woody Guthrie quote about folk music. Did you hear that? Where he was like, I'm often asked about folk music, and I always think, what is folk music? I never heard a horse play music. All music is folk music.
yeah. All people play music. Yeah.
Again, paraphrasing. But yeah, like you've got your folk tales and you've got your personal stories, and there's I think a lot of overlap between the two. And then your kind of folk tales can bleed into a little bit of magic and a little bit of other world and a little bit of myth. But they're lovely and grounded in that it's like they went over to this fella who I'm related to, and they didn't go to that beach. They went to that beach. You know what I mean? You're like,
you're in it then, like as in I'm in the story with you because it's suddenly. And people would ask me after stories, tell me, it's like, is that real? And I think that's when you tap into the channeling the story, and people go like, well, yeah, it's as real as you want it to be, like and but folktales capture that a bit more, I think, because it is that beach, no, not that beach, the other beach, and it is the two brothers going up to your man down the road, and the names and the places where you landed. And there's always some level of superstition attached into it, or warning, I feel, in folktales that are more explicit, a bit more obvious than myths, which take a bit of unpacking and figuring out.
Well, they're also yeah. Like I don't want to sound like I'm saying one is I think they're different. I think myths. I don't think they're like onions. I think they're like feckin', sedimentary rock. They kind of accrete layers around them as different people tell them and interpret them and retell them. And I think folktales have somewhat less of that accretion, but...
Accretion.
You know what I mean? When you build up a layer of stuff and then it gets impacted.
Spell accretion.
ACCRETION, I think.
Accretion. Like concrete? No.
Rocks getting bigger.
When something builds up. And then something else.
Yeah. And it kind of morphs a bit, or it.
Yeah.
And it slightly changes, but not massive changes.
That kind of thing. That's
Accretion.
I like that too. Yeah, I can see the cogs.
Well, what I notice on that note between mythology and folktale is that in North Clare, between Ennistimon and Doolin, there was the greatest collection of folktales ever in the world, well, ever in Europe, was collected in the 30s. And it was collected in the 30s by a man called Delargy, who recorded this great storyteller called Stefan O'Hillera. Now there's other storytellers recorded as well. There was a local travelling chimney sweep, and there was a few other local farmers and fishermen, but the collection was published in the 80s by Bailey's, which is is in UCD in Dublin. It's called Lower Stefan, because the bulk of the stories were from Stephen Hillary. And I was actually just looking there to see, I have a copy of it somewhere. I can get it after. You can do a photo. But anyway,
go on.
Anyway, what's really interesting is that there's stories in it, some that have come from Greece and Egypt, and they must have come up by the sea. But there's also stories in it that have come from Finland and way up there. And it's really weird because during the lockdown, I was down in the Burn and I was doing a walk, and the tour guide, more from a geological point of view, he said, the glacier, when it moved across Europe, he said it actually brought seeds from Northern Europe. So we have plants in the Burn. He said that you find them in the Antarctic. He said, and also, he said, the wind and the sea have also brought stuff up from Africa. So I thought, wow. But then more wow, the stories that have come. Now they obviously came like folk tales, as you point out, with people and the movement. And a story from Egypt didn't necessarily come as an Egyptian came up to County Clare and told it. It was the
Chinese whispers.
Accretion, can I use it?
Yeah.
But what's really funny is that there's one story in it, and the Egyptian version is like the man, came down from Mount Olympus because the Greek version says, he came down from Mount Olympus with blah blah blah, and then the Clare version goes, he came over Mount Callan, which is over there, So, you know, and there's other stories in this collection where they refer to Knockma, which is in Carolstrand on the Mayo-Galway border, near where I grew up, right? Actually, Knockma would be the hill behind my house where I grew up in Mayo. Knockma would be Carolstrand, County Galway. But again, there's references to Knockma, like where they jumped up on a horse and the horse changed into a plough, and they went and they flew through the sky on a plough and they ended up in Knockma. And it's well-known fairy hill, Knockma. It's actually Queen Maeve was buried there for a while before they moved her to Sligo. Before they moved her up to
I was always wondering why they moved her up to Sligo.
That's a bigger conversation for me.
That'll be the Andres and Stack part 2.
Yeah. To say, but anyway, to answer your question about, you know, folk tales and mythology, there's no doubt that some Greek myth could be there, and it could be like 12 nights long. But by the time it goes from boat to boat and boat, it comes up to County Clare, it's a different story, and it may have the accretion, and it may be a totally different, and it could have like Knockma and Mount Callan, where it was like the Sphinx and Mount Olympus. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they might get longer and shorter and dependent, and mix in a few other bits of stories in with them.
Because we're all storytellers, and like I was only reading your father's book of stories and short stories, and the couple. It was just a story about, you know, a couple who break up and they're best friends with another couple and they break up, and the breakup story. It was beautifully told. It was beautifully easy to see yourself in, and also I was half expecting it to be a book of folk tales. I was half expecting it to be. I was like, all right, no, these are just all right. Yeah, of course, Andres the Stacks, the Shanachie of Ireland, or one of. You know, his father was a writer. He was a storyteller of short stories, of stories that are very accessible to people, and not going into the magic realism and the Tua de Dan and the fairies. You don't have to be telling stories, because you want to. We're constantly doing it. You know, we're constantly projecting and creating stories as we go anyway. So if everyone's a storyteller, then I guess where folk tales and, you know, have the real like superstition and the fact that you're bringing in the landscape and the fairy and the magic, and that's what's kept alive in them, I think, is that bit of magic.
I think that's a beautiful thing about the folktale, is that it enchants the place that you're in. There's something about myth that always feels a little bit further away. Whether, you know what I mean? Like, it's a little
that's
bit
a valid
more
point.
long ago and far away, when people were giants and Fionn McCool strode across the land with, you know, chucking boulders around like they were slithers, as opposed to right here, right now, you might hear a bell. You know, it's very, there's an incredible immediacy to them that's just something really cool.
And walking down only your ferry fort down there that we were just walking through and having a look around, all of a sudden you feel like my spine got tingles on it, walking up into it and going, oh Jesus, the land is alive, like, you know, these trees are here for a long time, and, you know, whatever is fucking Jesus, you know, you get that excitement, and you look out across, you're looking at the Atlantic Ocean there, that just eyes have been looking at for thousands of years from these hills, like, you know, and just there's just something that kind of goes in compared to kind of, you know, being up by Errigal in Donegal, or down in the bloody Ring of Kerry, where you're looking at these, like, maybe giants did make this landscape. You know, maybe magic was molded. Almost, you can start going into magic mode.
But didn't they write a lot of stories to suit those things? Like, isn't there, like, you know how we say about the lake in Sligo Leitrim, where the soul of your man is in your man's eye is in the bottom of it?
And
there's another place where there's a rock, and it looks like a butter churn was taken out of it or landed into it. It's in one of the stories. It's one of the ones where Finn McCool comes home, and there's some fella there, and he's jealous of this guy. This guy is talking to his wife, so he picks up the butter churn and he throws it. And lands. And there's some massive rock where there's just a hole in the rock. But obviously people wrote these stories. They told these stories to explain, that's why that's like that.
Yeah.
And the Devil's Bit down in Cashel.
Yeah.
Like the Giant's Causeway is a very obvious
Giant's Causeway.
Yeah.
All these little geographical places where you're like, well, that's there because Fionn McCool had a stroke one day. You get that kind of thing as well of
But Fionn McCool was basically just like, it was just like, you know, these Bradley Cooper film, The Hangover. Just a few lads. It's just like an ancient version of Hardy Books. It's just a few guys rambling around, gang of lads.
Rambling around.
Everyone loves those stories.
Trouble. They're great.
But so water is a big theme, obviously. The two lads going out fishing, and like I think so much because Ireland's an island, and we're obsessed with water.
And I think there's something about the water in Irish myth is like the passage to the other world. Like, you know those stories that land under wave, where it's like if you swim down far enough, you land on Earth. And you can breathe the air, and there's people walking around. There's this whole kind of idea of water as like threshold. And like you look out, you know, when we were out by the ferry fort looking out at the water and the sun glinting off the water, looking like fucking molten silver.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Like the light in the west of Ireland. Every time I come down here, I'm like, Jesus Christ. It's like nowhere else. This silver light that you get here. That is.
Sure, if Dublin is half an hour behind GMT in London at Greenwich Mean Time, we must be another half an hour. So we're an hour later. You know, but obviously we're a different time zone. We're a different world here on the west coast.
It feels like a different world, whether it's the time zone or not. You enter into a bit of a vortex for sure. Because
especially when you go to the islands, like if you go to Inisheer or Inishbofin or Inishturk, you really feel and it's not just the fact that you're, you know, on an island, but you get that feeling of what you know, you feel closer to that other world, you know.
Timelessness is there, and I think that is a very special thing about slowing down, and this whole lockdown, this whole epidemic that's going through the world is slowing everything down now when people have to slow down. And amazingly, Dublin is being kind of evacuated. People are going back to the countryside.
It's great,
realizing that like your story here is amazing. Like, you know, a fellow was gigging non-stop, paying extortion rent in Dublin, gigging left, right and centre every time I looked at the stage you were there. There he is again. and then all of a sudden you can't go anywhere, so you have to come out here, says you, and plant a garden, you know, start fishing a load of mackerel and cooking for yourself, and all of a sudden time slows down, but your enjoyment of the little things drastically increases, you know. And you're not getting the endorphins, you're not running on endorphins.
Well, you're not running on those little dopamine hits and adrenaline of like, you know.
Is that what it is?
That's what it is, I reckon. It's all these little short term. It's the same with phones and computers. Every time you get a notification, it's a little jolt of dopamine into your brain.
To make
you just go, you know, come back now and be happy. And when that stuff drops away, you just slow right down. Like we were talking about it earlier. The tiredness descends.
Don't be yawning on camera. Jeez, you put them to sleep. Is it a bedtime story you need now before?
And lullaby.
Look at you. You come drive right down to Clare now and we'll do a podcast this evening. I'll just go to sleep. Don't mind me, I'll just curl up in the corner.
Forgot your STD card. Sick.
No, I didn't.
We weren't going to say no. Sound issues, Andrea.
Sound issues. That was the line.
Issues.
That was the party line up there. That was the party line.
I'm going to tell Oisin and Rue.
Stop clapping, you were kill you.
I'm syncing up the sound so you
Oh my God.
So to answer your question, water is very important, and it's funny because I was on the island of Sicily one summer. I got a gig on a anarchist theatre ship that was sailing from Sicily to Tunisia, but due to political unrest in Tunisia, it didn't go to Tunisia. It was going to go to Malta, then it didn't go to Malta. It just stayed around Sicily. Now it was great, but in Sicily you really feel that they're on an island. And maybe it's because I was there as a tourist, and maybe tourists when they've come here, but maybe that's because Sicily is part of Italy. Do you know what I mean? Like politically. Whereas with us, like we're definitely an island that we're very independent from Europe and Britain, but sometimes we forget. Like it's really interesting that on the coast we all eat fish, but the minute you go 10 miles in, you don't eat fish. So I find I eat a lot of fish if I'm in Galway town or if I'm up and down the coast in Clare or Mayo. But when I was growing up, would say inland, like there was people, say near us in Shrewd or Hetford or Tuam, people might only eat fish once a week. And there was never anybody's favourite.
Yeah, it was what you ate on a Friday when you couldn't have meat.
Catholicism.
Catholicism.
Like
it was punishment food.
You were depriving yourself. Whereas, so I find it strange how so many aspects of islandish, of being of an island, like the island of Ireland, is knocked out of us. Both, you know, politically, the way the colonisers try to divide us and all that. But also, and I find when we get back to the mythology, we feel that again. the fact that all of us all over the island share the Finn McCool story. So many stories are common in different places, yet like it's amazing that we've got the same stories up and down the country and so many of the same tunes, yet we all have our own different versions and our own different dialects.
Well,
That's
yeah.
magical.
I do think, because whether it was knocked out of us or whether the people who were living on the coast and the islands had a massive fear of the water, and there was a huge, like, I was only talking to my girlfriend's grandmother, who was saying, like, they grew up in Kerry, and you know, they'd never be let out without anyone out there, but they'd go swimming very occasionally. It wasn't a case, like, the huge fear of the sea.
Well, there used to be a superstition that fishermen shouldn't learn to swim.
Yeah.
Because if you
To
fall
believe
in,
if the sea wants to take you, the sea will take you.
yeah.
So when we were in school in Tuam, there was a few lads boarding from Inisheer, and when they would go to the swimming pool, they couldn't tell the people at home. Say if I was out in the island and I met the lads, I'd say, "How much you John do to Fossix off?" He'd say, "No, brain root fishing and sure. Don't tell the people on the island that I'm learning to swim in Tuam." Yeah.
No way! So
Yeah.
islanders were told not to learn how to swim.
Because if you fall off the boat, it's because the sea wants to take you.
It's different now. I think
Of
now
course.
they're all,
It's different now, like, but that was back in the day. There was like,
Again, that's a huge respect for, fear for, like.
I mean, if that's your, like, that's the mentality of an almost kind of, it is almost kind of like pagan worship of the sea, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
It is a bit, yeah.
If the sea is a hungry
It's a
god,
sacrifice.
it gives to you and it takes from you, and you just have to be okay with that.
Oh, the sea is a hungry goddess. Oh, Neptune.
No, before we get into
fine.
astrology and talking about Neptune rising over Mercury, I will say you have a very interesting link with John O'Donoghue, and your storytelling, you told me the last time I was down here, was hugely inspired by and kind of malleable, or made malleable by John O'Donoghue. Can you tell us a little bit how he helped craft your style?
Yeah, well, it was around 1998, 1999. I dropped out of college in Sligo. I was in Sligo doing environmental chemistry, and I loved it. And Sligo was a great town for music, and I learned a lot. I was playing fiddle tunes, and I was learning loads of tunes and stuff. But when I got into second year of college, doing science, the lab work, I didn't like it. Like I was drinking a lot of alcohol at the time, and sometimes I was reacting with the chemicals inside in the lab. You know, whether it was farting or burping or whatever. So it wasn't going well, and I came back down here, and my father was home from San Francisco, and I was talking to him, and I was looking at other courses, and I didn't have the points to do arts in Galway, which is, you know, what everyone wanted to do arts in Galway or arts in UCC, and obviously I didn't have the points to get into national school teaching. And you know, when you're into Irish music, Irish language, you know, so and at the time, I suppose I was at that age, you know, when you're 19 or 20 and you drop out of college, it's you know, the thing is, you get a job in Supermax or else go to college, you know what I mean? So I was trying to get into college.
Trying to avoid Supermax.
Yeah, it's grand. Like, look,
It's grand.
It's grand.
Worse things.
Yes, indeed. But I suppose it was. But that
Let's
was
just extend the
But at the
adolescence.
time,
yeah. And a neighbour of mine was just started this course, and there was another lad here from Doolin, in County Clare called Shannon, a friend of mine. We started this course called Heritage Studies in Galway, and it was in the RTC, and I kind of thought, oh, it could be tourism, could be shite, but my outlet said, oh no, that's John O'Donoghue. He's a friend of mine. He's from Clare. He's from Finor. I says, he's a priest. He said, he's more than a priest. Like, he's kind of like a modern day druid, and he's all this and that. So I said, grand, I'd give it a go. So I get in, and it was a very interesting class. There was lots of people who were very interested in mythology, archaeology, folklore, heritage from a tourism point of view, of various aspects of Irish culture, and way ahead of its time. Like, this was in the 90s, as I said. So we start this anyway, and I'd say within a week we were all in love with Jono. He was just so
I'd say so.
and he could speak fluent German and fluent Irish, and he would do that. He'd be telling us something, and he would say, and my German friend, she said to me, he was going to it like that, and he would say, and then the old woman from Connemara, she came round the corner, and she said, how much you know? So he would do all this, and he would say, and Mrs. Houston's daughter, Whitney, said, he'd refer. So he had this great way of orating and presenting, and he had such crack. And like, if we went on a field trip to the Cage Fields,
Oh, nice.
and he knew that I had spent, grew up in Mayo as a teenager, so he'd be getting me on the front of the bus to be telling everyone about Mayo and this crack, and there'd be different people butting in about football. They'd say, look, that's Henry Dixon's house, who's a Mayo footballer. I'd say, yes, Henry Dixon's house, and you can see the two-story. Yes, that's it, blending football and architecture as only a Mayo man can do. So we'd have this crack, and then he knew my father's from Clare and that I had a connection with Clare, and he encouraged that, but he encouraged all of us. And there was one time then, I think it was coming up to Christmas, we were doing the presentations, and it was great because you could either submit a paper of whatever, 5,000 words or whatever, or you could do a presentation. So we're all like, go do a presentation. And this was before the internet was big. I remember there was a guy in the class called Jacob. I think he was German or Dutch from English, but he could type up stuff. So whenever we'd say, it was that era when you'd get someone in your class to type up your stuff because you couldn't. But anyway, we're doing the presentations, and there was a friend of mine called Darren McLaughlin from Ballinasloe, and he was doing the presentation on, he's actually from Ballinabamba, it's a small village outside Ballinasloe, and he was doing this presentation on birds and birds watching, and it was good, but John would say to him, tell us more, Darren. And he did it, and he finished 2 minutes ahead of schedule, and John said, back up there now and tell us more, something, what are you passionate about? Hurling. And then, so he went from talking about thrushes and swifts, he goes, moving swiftly along, and then he got real passionate, and he was in Galway, were there, it was the night in a Joe Connolly and Muncher and Galway, and suddenly he said, you see, that's it, that's what I need in your presentation, I need the passion, and he talked like that. So then when I came up to do mine, I was doing it about, I was big into Irish music at this point, and I was talking about a night in Shrewd where I grew up, where it was music. I said there was this great music session going on, and then the barman rang, he rang the bar staff and he said, put on a round of drinks there for everyone, because his wife had just had a baby boy inside the hospital in Galway, so everyone was excited, new baby boy, barman in the town, so there was drinks in the house, and there was a big session took off, and I went on to talk about this session, about the old box player and about the guy who started dancing, and I was telling the story, and John would be there, like he'd say, yes, and tell us more, and who was up in the rafters looking down at you? I'd be like, oh, the fairies, yes, and tell us more. So I'd say, and then the fairies were flying out, and he was like, yeah, give us more of that. So he was really encouraging of it, and then he would give us feedback and say why he liked this and why it was magical, and he kind of helped you to tap into that bit of Irish psyche that we all have it, And to be honest, when you think of today the word the crack, it means a lot of people, pints, but actually we all have a deeper thing inside us. And it's that mix of kind of subconscious creativity that comes when it's not just us talking, it's about where the magic inside of us is mixing. It's the subconscious soul is mixing. It's all that, and it's very unique to Irish, but indeed it's a global, universal thing. But I think we're very close to it, as Freud and Jung would say about the various things they say about us, because we love when we get together. It's like a session. In music, but even without the actual music, the stories and the music and the crack, it's that session of the souls, And John really encouraged that in a way that was way ahead of his time. And what was really interesting was, round about that time, we didn't know, of course, he was writing this book on Ankara, and he would come in to class and he'd write on the board, landscape has presence and memory, discuss. And we'd all say, the Famine Ridge is good, the Famine Ridge, and before that, you had the glacier, and he would just be going on, and how does the mountains influence, why is it people from Mayo go mountain, and people from Clare go mountain, and then he'd be talking about the dialects, the landscapes, the way we talk, the music, the this, the that, be going on forever. And then it was only a year or two later when it came out on Ankara, I was like, oh yeah, I remember the day, it was like we had helped him.
Oh, beautiful. Wow, what a soul friend indeed.
Amazing.
Yeah, indeed, a soul friend.
Yeah,
and I miss him so much,
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's great.
That's amazing.
Another legend, sure, look at.
Yeah.
So I was it's funny because, when when you're applying for jobs, and lately I'd be looking at, my storytelling CV, and as well as doing the Man from Mugaga on radio, whatever, I'd be looking at the education, and I'd be thinking of the things, and like to think that 2 years of doing heritage studies and graduating from that, like at the time I didn't know what I was doing in college, but now it makes so much sense.
I think so often, like when you're talking about the story of your own life,
Yeah.
I think the older you get, the more you realise that it makes sense in hindsight.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
And it makes me feel a lot more relaxed about where I am now, because I don't know where the fuck I'm going next at all. But I also know that I felt like this in my 20s and I felt like this in my teens. And when I look back now, there's a line through it all.
Well,
And there's quite a strong through line.
Yeah.
From this perspective, looking back on it.
Sure.
So you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You just kind of trust that actually it'll be there going forward as well.
I hope they're still online. The Abbey did a beautiful Dear Ireland, and one of the letters, it was in Dear Ireland 2. One of the letters was just letters from people all over Ireland explaining how they felt about the lockdown. And one of them was a story of a woman in her mid-30s thinking that she was back to feeling like she was 18 again, and all that anxiety of not knowing where she's going. And we were talking about earlier about like filling out forms, trying to fit into boxes, and trying to, the scatty brains get kind of penalised. But they're the creative brains as well.
It's hard to have a messy head in a world that isn't built for it sometimes. But that's,
And we're now in this, but the world is now a mess. All of the joining and the dots and all the boxes, they're all up in fucking air. And so all the people who are logistically good at putting the things into boxes anyway and ticking the forms and doing that, everything's gone messy. So now we're at a really exciting turning point where I think innovators, creators, strategical thinkers, divergent thinkers have a chance now to remold society a bit more, to kind of go, actually, we want more landscape in our lives. We want to be seeing the sea. I want to connect with the things I'm growing and eating and being able to be in the land, as well as be able to talk about the things I want to talk about, which is for me, and probably you if you're listening to it, myths and legends and stories and whatever it is, doing things, creating a life where your hobbies and your interests are your life, opposed to trying to plan out a way of being in an office to afford to make that as a hobby. Maybe now we're at a point where people go, my hobby is my life. My life is the thing I'm supposed to be doing.
And I think, the world is going through an incredibly destructive period of time. I think not just this year, but like in the last several years, globally around the world, there has been a huge amount of destructiveness and divisiveness and cruelty and nastiness, and the other side of destruction is creation always, because destruction clears out. As painful as it is,
sure,
it is a part of, there's a bigger kind of cycle at work. And I think it's like the story that you like of the black dog and the weaving,
which one? Mother doing the Nachtkuss.
Well, there's an Irish black dog story, and then there's
a Native American black dog
told by
Michael Meade.
Michael
That's
Meade.
where you got it from.
That's where I got it from.
How do I know the name Michael Meade?
He's an amazing storyteller.
Where's he from? Up north?
America.
Oh, he's American.
My brother introduced me to
Does
him.
he do a bit of acting as well?
I don't know, he might have.
Is there a Michael Meade?
He was a cycle.
Was there one of the lads in Wayne's World called Michael Meade?
They're doing a new not Michael Meade, they're doing a new Wayne's World. Anyway,
it was a Michael Meade.
no, it's the black dog is that story of like, no matter what's knitted together, it always gets ripped apart, but then you can have a chance to knit it back together again.
And you knit it better every time. Is the point. And it is that kind of thing of like,
it's an upward cycle.
That's the evolutionary principle, is that there's always creation and destruction, and every time you have that chance to recreate, you have a chance to do it better, because you always do. Like, it's like telling a story. You tell a story once and it'll be great, and then you'll go, actually the next time I do that I'm going to add something in. And
I only heard you tell that story recently enough, and I heard you tell it again, it was better. And the moral of that story, if I want to look for one or pick one out, is that the story, the bit of music in it that was told it wasn't the right one, turned out to be the nice one, because it was recreated after your man had gone away and died.
Totally.
So like the absence of him, the song needed that bit of sadness. So now that he's gone, we need that bit of sadness. And our graw for the tragic, our graw for the landscape that makes you cry because it's so fucking beautiful, that you need something to like turn the knife a little bit.
You need a little bit of pain.
Yeah, because it brings you back to feeling
plenty
human.
of that.
But it brings you back into the human condition. Yeah.
It's I
I think we've come to our end, lads.
Have we?
I think we'll leave it there since we so gracefully came to a nice bit of quiet. Andreas, thanks so much. Oh.
Thanks a million.
Thanks for bringing the spuds.
Good of Mila Margaret. Thanks for cooking us the fish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We leave it
lovely,
there. So.
lovely day.
Beautiful,
And,
great.
gorgeous to talk to you.
Thanks so much for listening, guys. We really enjoyed that chat with Andreas. If you like what we do and you want to leave a review, we would love that too. So if you want to share this podcast, give us a thumbs up, follow the links below to follow more about Andreas the Stack and all his great work in storytelling, as well as the links to our web pages, social media, and our Patreon. If you want to go to patreon.com/Candlelit Tales to see what we do, you can give us some support there too. So that's it from now. Next week we'll be having some sound-based stories, so tune in. We have lots to discuss. We might even have a special guest to discuss these things with. And there's some very exciting things in the pipeline. So stay tuned, keep an eye out, and keep the thumbs going. Thank you.